Let's call this meeting to order of the Auburn Water District, and it is January 20th of the year 2020.
22nd.
22nd. I got the year right this time. Of the year 2020 at 4 p.m. I'm Mary Sylvester, the president, and now we'll go around and introduce ourselves.
Jason Paulina, trustee.
Dan Delito, trustee treasurer.
Bob Kavanaugh, trustee.
Casey Geiger, trustee.
Steve Phelps, City Council, Mayor's appointee.
Mike Broadbent, assistant superintendent.
Sid Hazelton, Superintendent.
Tanya Don Scott. She's Crowley, trustee.
Welcome, everyone. I have a couple things to do today, and the first thing I'd like to do is, with your permission, I have a slight modification of the agenda I'd like to propose and request that we consider. So I'm passing around essentially a reordering of things.
I gotta leave at 5:30.
We're going to be done at 5:30. We're going to use every form of discipline and best practice to achieve our goal. And I made enough copies of the proposed. So I would entertain a motion to revise the agenda order as shared. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Okay.
I didn't vote. I didn't have a chance to look at it.
It's the same basic items but reordered. And I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to begin with something that I'd like to say both for this meeting and an update of things. So I think we want to make sure today that we use all of the best ground rules for how we're going to interact. We have a lot of important business to do. Everyone will have a chance to talk, but not all at one time, one person at a time. And I think it's important that we not only think about what we say, but also pay attention to good listening. And that can't be done if everybody is talking at the same time. And we're going to be done at 5:30. The other thing I need to tell you is that I have given a lot of thought. I was actually elected president last April because we found ourselves in a difficulty in March, our normal time by bylaws for an election. And I stepped forward in April, or between the March and the April meeting, I think you may recall, with some misgivings because I have a number of issues in my family that I knew were going to be challenging, and yet I do have a lot of background in board governance, and what the request was, would I help the board come together? And it has been a lot of work to try to do that. It's been an honor and a privilege to spend the last year trying to build in some fabric and structures of board governance that might have, I hope, will help us around priority setting. But I have decided I'm not going to run for president again in March. And March is our next election. And that means that everyone who would wish to consider serving in what I believe is a very important role as president. It's not a particularly powerful role. That's not the job of the president. The job of the president is to facilitate the meetings and to hold to good practice for informed decision making. That's what our board president does. And sometimes that requires bringing the questions of what are our agreed upon priorities together and helping us hold to the priorities unless an emergency has come up. And something often does come up. However, we have to pay attention not to get pulled in 15 different directions at the same time because we can't be effective that way. I certainly hope that as those of you who are continuing on in the board, and I have another year in my term, so I'm not leaving the board, but I will not have the opportunity or the time to make the commitment to stay on as president. As many of you know, in my family, I had a brother who died the day before our December 18th meeting, and I couldn't be there because I had to be here. And I have a mother who's almost 99, and she lives in Indiana, and I can't not be with her in the way that I was not with my brother because I have responsibilities here. But I intend to uphold all my responsibilities as a trustee. It's just the role of being the president is a really important one in terms of holding the framework of the agreements that we make and helping facilitate good decision-making and process in the doing of that. So as you talk amongst yourselves, I'm giving you this notice because amazingly, though we're in the middle of January, the March board meeting will be here in no time. We have the February board meeting, and that's Tiz's last meeting. And then we have the March meeting, and that's the election. So people should start to give some thought to whether you're interested in stepping up to serve as president in the role that is part of our bylaws. And I didn't want that to be a last-minute surprise. So amongst you, please give that some thought. I will continue to be a strong advocate for respectful discourse, information as the foundation of decision-making so that informed decisions can be made to the extent possible by consensus, but if not, at least respectfully understanding that there are agreements to disagree, even if we don't get the vote happening the way we want it to. So it is with that in mind, and I'll have my eye on the clock, I have to say, whoever takes on the job of president, Casey knows this too, having been a former president himself, you have to hold the framework for conversation, discussion, and you have to watch the clock at the same time. So that's the job, and please give thought to who might be the person who would wish to step forward and take this important position next. So the next thing we need to do is approve a bunch of minutes, and I hope that you read your packet in doing your homework for the meeting, because you got a whole bunch of them. And this would be a time to draw your attention to important aspects of the minutes that you believe need to be changed. And just as a tip for future meetings, as always, something we now do with other parts of this, if you had corrections when you got your packet, you could have always sent your thoughts to Tanya or Cindy. So that we don't have to use meeting time for this. But if you do see corrections, let's begin with the November 20th, 2019 minutes. Are there corrections to be made?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? And Steve abstained. Andy, you always have a chance since you were here. If you have a correction,
yes.
please pipe up. It's not open session per se, but you were the person who was here. Okay, December 18th, we did 3 things on December 18th. That's the reason I was here and not in Indiana. We had a regular business meeting, we had a joint meeting, and we had a public hearing, all regarding a variety of important pieces of business. At the regular meeting, I will draw your attention to those minutes and ask, is there, I'll first entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion we approve all 3.
I second the motion to approve all 3.
Is there discussion related to any of the 3 in the threesome tis?
I think the most important thing missing in all 3 is, I believe that the public hearing, there was technically an open session and no public was present. The minutes as listed do not indicate that public was welcome or present.
Okay. Did you get that, Cindy? Good. And Tiz, you can always work with Cindy individually. Any other comments about the minutes? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, minutes are approved. Oh my, we are rocking and rolling here. In the financials, I want to, before I hand the floor over to Tanya, we have several things here, but we've talked somewhat about, and of course we have to keep our eye on our cash position, about what a dashboard would look like. And so I appreciate that I asked Sid and Tanya to create a dashboard on cash on hand. And this is one model of what a dashboard could look like if you find this part of your packet.
We were thinking it would fit good right here. Because this page is,
Got some space on it.
it has some space and it is an overview of, this is kind of, we call it the stats page, but it is kind of an overview like a dashboard.
It is. The reason why I'm interested in a dashboard is that all the data is important, but some we cannot lose track of in the middle of all the other data that we're attending to. And I think one thing that we all, as trustees, and I'm sure the treasurer would agree, can easily lose track of is cash on hand, which has been in fact a problem that has come up at every meeting, but we didn't really address it enough. We got pulled into looking at a bunch of other statistics too, of which there are many, but we lost the ball, we did not keep our eye on all the balls enough, so that here we are, having to make that in fact a very important priority. So if it's on a dashboard, not just part of the full, I mean, I'm happy to have it if it's big enough incorporated here, but I want to set a standard for us to continue even when I'm not president. And whoever will be elected the next treasurer, I'm hoping will keep a very eagle eye on the cash on hand questions so that we are on track with that and don't find ourselves moving on to other questions without noticing where we are on this. So, Tanya, do you want to talk through anything more about the financials? And including, so where are we with cash on December 2019?
At year end, we were at 469,000.
And that is what percentage, how many days is that?
That is,
Roughly 50 or so?
yeah,
So we're about half of where we need to be, hence the rate increase. So, if we're at 50 days, and we should be at 100 days, that's where we're going to get. But now we're at about a halfway position, yes?
So
Yes.
are we agreeing to include this on the stats page?
Are we agreeing to include this on the stats page? Thank you, Casey. Helps to have a past president, keep your eye on the
And if
top.
we are, I'd like to see a line on it that shows 100 days of cash.
So,
throw
it's
that-
like
Yep,
a line
that's
to
line
show
on
us
there.
how close we are.
yes, yep.
And I'm fine with it.
Jason has some suggestions too, maybe anyone with thoughts of how to format this could give it to Tanya to think about, so that we can see how as our rate increase starts to fill that pot, how close we are towards the attainment of where we need to be by December of 2020. Okay, thank you for making sure. And if you have other thoughts about dashboard indicators, the key about dashboard indicators is they are the most important ones. You lift up data out of the hole, we have to see the hole, but the dashboard is the one that don't lose your eye on this ball. Tanya, would you walk us through, please, the rest of the financials?
Yes. Water sales ended the year below budget, about $58,000, which was expected. Consumption was down about 3% from 2018. Expenses were also under budget, about $33,000. It is good, yes. Capital projects were $916,000, which was about 83% of the capital budget. The alum treatment came in on budget at $400,000, and that was bonded. And December financials are not completed until the final audit is done in March.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions for Tanya or Sid? Steve, I know you are immersing yourself in learning here about our numbers, so you may or may not want to use meeting time for that, but if you want to have a tutorial with Sid, and the other person who can help you is sitting right behind you over your right shoulder, Andy, who's got a real good eye for it. And I know he's a willing volunteer. Always. On how some of these things work, and many people are. Casey has really got deep history and how the financials work here too.
Okay, thank you.
We try to keep our eye real closely on a lot of things, and I think it's one of the most important things that we do. Cash, revenues, expenditures, consumption. Those are on the list of things. We also pay a lot of attention to receivables, bills and how they are, bills coming in on time, bills not coming in on time, and those that get into arrears, because that has a negative effect on our cash position when people owe us money. So, and we cost that out. Where is that again on our financials where we show the receivables?
The bottom right.
The receivables on this page, which is a wonderful piece of paper in that it's on a single page, but I will say that sometimes it gets a bit small. But here are receivables in the lower right, because that essentially is a negative situation for our cash flow, which is a financial responsibility to pay very close attention to. So where are we on receivables now? How many, we have some at 120 days in arrears, right?
And most of those, well, are either liened properties or on payment plans.
Okay.
Majority being
To make it
payment
up.
plans.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions associated with the financials? Okay, we are now at that time of the meeting for open session, and we have two members of, I forgot to put in ratification of payment of bills on my abbreviated, thank you. See, it takes a teamwork here.
I make a motion, we approve the bills for December.
I second the motion.
Thank you very much.
I've got one question.
Ask your question.
We paid main water a couple of times, that's for Greg's help.
Yes, yeah, we still retain him on a limited basis.
How much are we needing him, or?
He's in once every couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Helped out a tremendous amount with year end.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah, great.
there's
Yeah.
a wealth of knowledge there that
There is.
you don't want to lose
Right.
it at all, but certainly, just curious.
Ironically, Greg was in today, I saw him on the way out.
Okay.
I saw him too. He's been working to help us support, rate increase spreadsheets.
We're slowly phasing that out, so.
Just,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
there's
Steve,
knowledge there that,
Right.
One of the practices here is, while these bills have been paid, is the board sees the bills that have been paid and has an opportunity to ask questions about them and then ratifies their payment. And our agreement has been, we have a special tribute to Bob Kavanaugh. He is our eagle eye on these things. We can all be grateful to him, but what we have agreed is that because these items come in your mail packet, instead of using meeting time to go over every question, people who have questions as they're reviewing them can call into the office, and Tanya is a patient and outstanding explicator of the bills. Okay.
I had a couple, and Tanya answered them for me early before I got.
I am not surprised and so glad that they got addressed. There's a motion and a second to ratify the payment of the bills. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? No opposed? The motion carries, I believe, unanimously. All right, sorry I missed that from my short version. And this is open session now. We're happy to welcome two members of the public. We always hope people will come. You're welcome to speak now and say anything you want to.
I'm good.
Pretty good. The total budget, total revenue, is that shown on this page? Is that $2,603,000? Is that the total revenue?
Sid, I'll let you answer that.
Where are you looking now?
Auburn Water Financial Information Sheet,
It's on the stats sheet.
stat sheet, just the page before the bar chart that we were discussing.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at this sheet right here. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, You have sewer revenue.
What is the question again on,
What's the total revenue that comes into the Auburn Water
Yes,
District?
what's our
That's
revenue?
the metered,
That's the
revenue.
needed
But
revenue.
what
meter,
is our
yes.
total revenue?
the total revenue, you can, on the income statement, this one,
This
the
one here.
total revenue.
So that would include what, sewer or something?
Which one?
no,
No.
this is water, sewer is
Which one?
separate. We're just talking water tonight.
That'd be
This
other
is the
than
water
metered,
district.
other than metered.
What
revenue.
other the sources other
But you
than?
get fire protection's a big one.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Rent income, yeah, you can see the top revenues, all the items that go into revenue. Not just
Private-
water
private
sales,
protection.
but there's
I got it.
other types
Yeah.
of things.
Good, thank you for asking. The more people in our community who understand the complexity of what we work with, the better. Andy?
So one question I did have, I like this cash on hand
Good.
dashboard, I really like it. Maybe for the next meeting, we could have, if it's possible, 2 years or 3 years, since the last rate
Full
increase.
history.
Because if we're cash on hand is $800,000 and we're at 50% now, I'm looking on this chart, we were dangerously close to that
Yeah.
several times, so we would have been hitting the panic button last
In month.
January.
Quarterly.
Yeah?
So
If we had a
when do we
dashboard-
hit the panic button? This time staff hit the panic button right around midsummer, late summer, I think, when they said we need a rate increase. But when do we, as a board, should we be nervous?
That's
Because-
one reason for the dashboard is I
Well-
think we didn't pay enough attention. I think we started talking about it last spring, but we got diverted into other
But when do we
topics.
look at, if we could look at the progression from the last
I like that.
increase and see, it went up, obviously, but then it started, I would assume, tailing down.
How does it
But at
flow?
what point do we say, whoa, this isn't working, we gotta apply for another
It's a
rating?
really important question,
Very important.
so that it doesn't get away from us.
Because if 800,000 is the target, again, all of last year, we were scared, very close to it numerous
Right,
times.
exactly, that's exactly right, that's the point of the dashboard. And then we can develop, in our role as our fiduciary role, the board's response to what do we want to do. We're not ready for that now, but that is a future question. And I will respond to this also by saying that, as you know, thanks to our former trustee, Andy, we voted, well, we approved unanimously at our December 18th meeting that by April 1st, we will have some recommendations of all the options on how to finance pipe so that the board can start working on how do we want to look at that. We are now in a pay-as-you-go. Cash on the barrelhead, that's the cash payment version of this. I must say, I've said in one other context, if you live long enough, you see fiscally conservative positions change over time. That used to be the true blood of conservative fiscal policy was you pay as you go, no debt. If you live long enough, you start to discover some people now think the right thing to do is debt financing. That used to be considered the liberal position. But now there are more people who think that debt's the way to go because you spread a capital payment across a capital asset for a long time. And then some people, I think there could be a hybrid here. We as a board, whoever is president, we've already agreed to some things. So we will begin to study that in April after the superintendent has brought us a series of options. And Greg Layton, who was here earlier, and I had a chance to talk with Greg about a couple of questions. He's going to help work on what those financial options, because those all have to get paid for one way or another too. So we have work coming ahead, but this is the continuation of what we did in December 18th. Okay.
One more item for open session.
Yes.
Just wanted to thank the Whitman family. Obviously, they, in the past, have donated a lot of property to the whole recreational area of Lake Auburn, and we really appreciate that.
That's a little great grandpappy for you.
Oh, yeah.
It's good to have good relatives, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
could have kept it in the family.
All right, well, we get the relatives that we've got anyhow, no
That's
matter
right.
what.
It is out of my hands.
It's out of our hands. All right, this is great. We are going to be done in an hour. I feel very confident. So, cost sharing with Lewiston. At the December 18th meeting, we unanimously voted on a board resolution to authorize the Auburn Water District President, Treasurer, and Superintendent to immediately begin research regarding the current water usage and recommend fair acts and practices associated with the cost apportionment agreement between the water utilities, the City of Lewiston and the Auburn Water District. That was unanimously passed on December 18th, and we asked the superintendent to, for this meeting, to bring us his recommendation. And he did that, of course he did. And that was in your packet, so I'm going to pass the baton to Sid after everybody finds theirs amongst the papers that we have. No, I just had mine. Oh, here it is.
I think it's the last page on your packet.
It's this
Last
one.
thing in your packet,
And I'm going to let you have a chance to talk us through what you offered.
Okay.
Did you find it?
I think so, the
You
last
did.
page.
yeah. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read this. If not, I just wanted to go through. One thing I felt was important, and I feel that there is not enough information out there, and unfortunately probably a fair amount of misinformation on what we really share with the City of Lewiston in terms of cost apportionment. So in this report, I'm not gonna do this ad nauseum, but I just do want to go down through this list of things so you get a better feel for what it is that we do share and how we currently do it. At the end of the report is what I've come up with for an analysis moving forward that I think is fair and makes some sense. But I'll just go through this. The current cost share practice that we have on the front page, if everyone has it in front of them, what I've got is the apportionment that we had in 2019. This covered 11 months of operations. At the time this was done, we had January through November, so this is not a full complete year. It's 11/12ths of a year. But we do apportion up at the UV plant the chemicals. All the chemicals that we use in the treatment of water is billed each month to the City of Lewiston based upon the percentage of water that they withdraw from the lake. Obviously, you draw more water, you're using more of the treatment chemicals. That is apportioned to Lewiston. You can see that is a 60-40. So Lewiston does pay more for chemicals than Auburn does. Insurance on that building is prorated 60-40 as well. All the electricity that's used at the UV plant is billed 60-40. Again, that's based upon the water consumption. The only caveat to that is that Auburn's, as you know, Auburn's finished water pumps are located in that facility. So Auburn pays for the power for running those finished water pumps. Lewiston's water goes by gravity from that facility. So we do not have them pay for our electricity for that. The operations includes all things like, the lab testing, lab supply, sampling, equipment maintenance, the propane. Those items are shared 50-50 because they do not relate directly to the volume of water that's withdrawn from the lake. All the in-lake sampling that we need to do, we would need to do irregardless of whether or not Lewiston was a partner in this effort. If they weren't there, we'd still need to have this expense. So it makes sense to, and that's how that is set up, to share 50-50 to ease the burden on both utilities. All the personnel at the facility, the treatment plant manager, lab director, that is our employee. It's paid by us, but everything is billed half to Lewiston. Wages, benefits, everything is half billed to Lewiston. We supply a lab tech, as does Lewiston. We supply an operator, as does Lewiston. The watershed manager that's up there is similar to the treatment plant manager. All that is billed half to Lewiston, as well as the education and outreach coordinator through the commission. That's paid 50-50. We supply a SCADA technician, as does Lewiston. The Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, as you know, that is currently, as outlined in the interlocal agreement, that is funded 50-50. as the activities needed to be performed are required by both entities, and the cost to operate the various activities as required to protect the water supply do not relate directly to the volume of water withdrawn from the lake. Most of the capital and special projects, those are covered by a variety of interlocal agreements, which you've all got copies of a few months ago. So you kind of know where that comes from. My recommendation moving forward, I kind of put a little bit of a matrix in place and a question, a series of questions to ask ourselves as we move forward. Every capital project or things that we look to partner with the city of Lewiston with, we do have separate agreements for. What we don't have is a series of questions to ask ourselves to make sure that it's fair. So I kind of put that down. I got four questions to ask ourselves, and I added a fifth one since I wrote this. Is there a project? Is it needed by both entities? If yes, then both entities should fund the project to some degree. If no, then we shouldn't be sharing the cost. Does the project benefit both entities equally? If yes, both entities should fund the project 50-50. If no, then the cost of the project should be apportioned based upon the benefit received. Number 3, is the project more expensive because it's serving both entities? And is it based upon the volume of water withdrawn? If yes, the cost of the project should be apportioned based upon the water withdrawal. If no, both entities should fund it 50-50. Would the project be needed regardless of whether either entity was getting water from Lake Auburn? If yes, then there is a mutual benefit to cost sharing. And as I mentioned, a fifth question, which I don't have on this report, but since I wrote this, I do feel is important. Would the project cost one entity more than the other in the future? That's an important question. I gave some examples here. Using the above analysis, I've got some examples of things that we do or have done. Land purchase by the commission. What I wrote here, and this gets into the question 5, which I didn't address. Currently, when land is purchased by the commission, it is shared on a 50-50 basis. It has been ever since the commission was put in place back in 1991. However, looking at the purchase of land, I do believe that it's worthy to look at. Would the project cost one entity more than the other in the future? If you look at land purchase, when the commission buys a tract of land, that land comes off the tax rolls, because commission is a tax exempt entity. That has always been an issue, and that's an issue that the commission has always been sensitive to address. We purchase, based upon priority, land that is going to protect the lake. One thing that happens when that comes off the tax roll, obviously, in perpetuity, every year that's land the city is not getting tax revenue for. Looking at it in a purist sense, I believe that is something that Lewiston, it happens at the expense of Auburn. Lewiston benefits from that. I do see moving forward having something in place to recognize the fact that Auburn no longer receives tax revenue for properties, and I think there should be some type of agreement in place that recognizes that, so that Lewiston is accounting for the loss of Auburn's tax revenue in perpetuity. If you look at the alum treatment,
Sid, just on the land,
yeah.
Something to remind everyone too is if the Watershed Protection Commission was to ever go away, half the land goes to Lewiston, half the land goes to Auburn, so I continue to support funding that 50-50 with a tax break maybe for Auburn, which would be kind of difficult to come up with, but I mean, if Auburn Water District is going to end up with half the land holdings, if the commission ever goes away in the city of Lewiston, it would be fair for us to pay for half of it in the beginning of it, so.
That's all we'll talk about. I mean, that's the next step, is talking about this. The first thing was to let Sid have his recommendations.
Yeah.
But there are many ways to look at some of these questions.
You know, looking at the most recent thing, I know it caused a stir, but the most recent alum treatment that we did, the project was needed by both entities to preserve the water quality. It benefited both entities equally. The alum treatment was not more expensive because it was serving both entities and was not based upon water withdrawal. The treatment was needed regardless of whether either entity was getting water from Lake Auburn. There was mutual benefit, and it made sense to fund the project 50-50 in order to ease the financial burden on each utility. You know, that answers one of those 5 questions. If we look at, of course, we know that in the future, if we ever do lose our waiver of filtration, we will need to build a filter plant. If that's true, it would be needed by both entities and would benefit both entities equally. It would be needed regardless of whether either entity was getting water from the lake, but it would be more expensive to build based upon the volume of water withdrawn. If just Auburn had to build a filter plant, it would be a lot smaller than having them combined with Lewiston. It would have to be bigger because both entities were involved in it. So to me, in that case, it makes sense to negotiate the capital cost of construction based upon the apportionment of water used. It would make sense to apportion ongoing operation and maintenance, as we currently do as well with the UV plant. It's worth noting that when the UV plant was built back in 2011, there was an agreement in place. There was a series of agreements in place when that UV plant was built, how to fund it, and there was mention in there about apportioning costs based upon how it came out in the end. So that was part of that agreement back then as well. Just to conclude this, I believe our existing cost apportionment arrangement is fair to both entities, and it's in the best interest of both entities to continue as we do presently.
With a slight bit of adjustment from what you're saying.
Yes, with the adjustments the one that I mentioned in particular about the land purchase. One potential downfall to paying for all water based upon the 60-40 split would be the potential loss of control over operations and priorities. If Lewiston were expected to pay 60% of everything, it would follow that they would have majority control over operations. So their priorities might not be the same as ours, but if they have a major financial say in what happens, we could lose some operational control. One other thing to mention too, by partnering with the city of Lewiston gives us opportunities that we might not otherwise have. Like for instance, when that UV plant was built back in 2011, we applied for ERA money. The ERA money favored regionalization of projects, so we might not have even got that money had we not been a partner with Lewiston. So this is something to keep in mind. We've worked long and hard to get what we have in place right now in partnering with Lewiston. And I believe with these modifications, I think this is doable. Does not have to be we don't have to redesign everything. I feel strongly that my recommendations here could get us moving forward without having to upset the current way we do things. So that's the extent of my
Thank you for your work. I want to just return to, because a big topic obviously keeps coming up regarding the potential of a future time when filtration would be needed. Am I correctly understanding that your recommendation on that is that that would be 60-40 or based on usage?
It would be. I would think it would be based upon. Again, going back to the question that we asked when we go into a joint project, is this going to cost more because we are partnering? And I think that would, in order to accommodate a larger plant, because Lewiston has more flow than Auburn, I think it would follow similar to what happened for the UV plant construction.
Right.
There was language in that agreement about apportioning costs based upon extra expenses because we were doing it together. So I think that would follow in line with if that happened for a treatment plant in the future.
So you created a logical framework for thinking about it that at
Right.
least makes sense to you.
I think it makes sense to move forward on a case-by-case basis as things arise. You know, does it pass this straight face test of answering these questions? And I think that assures that there's gonna be a fair and equitable cost share. So I think this would
for your work
solve
on
those
this.
issues.
So we have, we don't have all night to talk about this, and one would think we probably would be capable of that if we chose to. I'd like to ask the board how you would like to proceed with more board discussion about this, next steps regarding this, and while, of course, this isn't officially open session, Andy, if you don't mind, you're welcome to chime in if you want.
Sure.
As a former city council member, and of course you can. We run kind of a official but not too official ship here. But let me start with trustees. How would you like to proceed?
I would like to do the motion that or refer to the motion of a few months ago to say that we've looked at cost sharing, we find it fair and reasonable, and that we consider this a studied and done issue, is how I would like to proceed.
Okay, I want to just go around the table, because I think we got Casey on the table.
That's not a motion, but just.
No, we're not, we're just talking now. Bob, are you
I
ready?
concur with Casey's suggestion.
Okay, Dan, how about you?
I wanna look really hard at what our ratepayers are doing. Our ratepayers are subsidizing Lewiston ratepayers on a lot of these items that are 50-50. So we need to continue to look at that, and we need to send a friendly note to Lewiston as soon as possible, saying that we're interested in opening up discussions on these other items.
That's what you think? Okay, Jason, what do you think?
I am a little bit perplexed about the land portion of this. It's not something I had considered, and what popped in my mind when you brought it up is if some arrangement is made to account for that, it benefits the water district and not necessarily the city. We don't pay the city for land, for lost tax revenue over time. We don't.
How would that get back to the city?
Yeah, that's sort of something that's one issue that I believe we should think through a little bit more deeply, and I would agree that we're overdue for discussing this with Lewiston. I think collaborating would probably be a better approach to say, this is something that's on the table, we'd like to review each of these items, and I do think we need to study it first and come to some conclusion as to where we all stand as a board on each of these.
Appreciate that. I
but
mean, because we don't all agree yet.
Yes, so I think we need to look at it some more. I'm not sure exactly what the next steps would be.
I want some thoughts, but if we hear, but I first want to listen to what everybody thinks. Tiz, what do you think about this?
I had some questions that weren't answered that I'll submit in writing. My position hasn't changed too much in that overall, I think the current agreements are okay. I think that we need to be clear in our language in that, like land purchase has nothing to do with the Auburn Water District, so I like the principle of having the city of Auburn not lose out on land acquisitions, but this is not the place to be talking about that or any, that's a watershed topic, and I just want, having that as the example is, to me, unclear. I would agree with Dan, I haven't done it, but I have the list of particular expenses and would like to look and say, are there any? I think it's all gone fine. I think the need to review, there should be a document or a rule that says it's reviewed at least every 5 years and not once and forever. So Jason talked about having to study it more. I can appreciate the frustration, because what do you want to study? In my opinion, we're to read the document, what we don't like, create a list of questions and comments, and go from there, but we shouldn't waste staff time or our time here sort of going round and round in a circle. If you've got a particular in the document, that's what we should be talking about here. I disagree with one, based on the documents we currently have. Alum is a chemical, therefore alum to me should have followed the chemical rule. Had that happened, I don't have a problem with anything else. If that is maybe not an awareness, because it's the only type of event in 20 years that this has been in existence. But for me, that was a mistake that I supported going forward because it was too little too late. So we need to establish a procedure that it doesn't happen again. And we need clarifications on definitions, because alum is a chemical to me and should have been split 60-40 had we done it early in the conversation.
Thank you. Steve, do you have any thoughts that you want to offer at this moment?
I think that matrix makes a lot of sense. I think if Lewiston uses more, they should pay more. And it's used, that's my feeling on it. If they're using more resources, then they should pay more.
Andy, how about you? Any thoughts you want to bring to this?
Well, I kind of go along with the ratepayer idea. I know, I understand what Sid was saying, and I agree with the fact that it costs what it costs, and it's like, for instance, the lake treatment. So that it's really, but it's still, you got more ratepayers on one side and less on the other side. So that means we are subsidizing Lewiston's ratepayers by paying more than our fair share, even though the actual cost might not be based on usage. We have to protect the lake anyway, yes, I know that, but now we've got two users, one using more than the other, does that mean that they benefit more? So I still think we need to look down that road. My other concern is when you talk about the agreements and the UV, we would renegotiate if we had to do a filter plant. Well, I think, no people saw the $7 million LA 911 upgrade coming, and it was initially, it was right in the document that says we will share 50-50 somewhere. So when it happened, it was automatic. The city shared 50-50. I have not seen in the documents, it tells me that if the UV plant had to upgrade to a filter, that we could renegotiate that filter plant. It sounds to me like we are still hung on a 50-50 deal.
Is that the
No.
case?
I'd want to see that clearly in writing that says we're guaranteed that we're not going to be automatically put into that. And for the repairs and maintenance afterwards, like you talked about 50-50 for various things. Because that, you talked about $1.5 million, $2 million a year to maintain the plant. That could be 50-50, based on some of this recommendation that I see. So not just building the plant, but the operations afterwards.
The operation you would base on usage.
Right.
Well,
Just
we
like we
don't
do
have
now.
that, we don't know that, I don't think so.
That's what we do
On
now.
water usage.
That's what we do now. So I assume that would continue.
Yeah, an operation is 50-50, right?
No, no.
Operation is 50-50, and it looks like when it comes to people,
The,
employees, we had 50% of paid by one
Kemp,
guy,
the-
and then
Equipment maintenance?
The chemicals are apportioned based upon usage. The personnel is 50-50. We supply some, they
right,
supply
which
some.
again, we need more people, and I think that's wrong. I don't think we.
If,
Yeah, I
if we
think it's
need,
wrong too.
I do think if we need more, if we put in a filter plant, we need more people because Lewiston is drawing more water than us. I think
Well,
that's something I would want to negotiate moving forward to make
Yeah.
sure that that's apportioned fairly.
Again, my position is I think the ratepayer is the one that takes it when we say that, when we say, well, you know, that cost is the same no matter what, so Lewiston gets a break because they have more ratepayers. I think the Auburn ratepayers take a little hit there because they're subsidizing Lewiston. Not necessarily what makes sense, like you said, we gotta have those people anyway regardless, I know, but we also have a mix of ratepayers at 60-40 or whatever that is. And it's only fair then that they pay their fair share. Now, that would be a benefit to us, because we pay less, right? I don't see why everybody's so
It
upset
should be
against
called
trying to pay less.
40-60, we're talking about water district, our water district,
Yeah.
we're first.
That's just my opinion.
We comment, well, I mean, we're looking for opinions. Do you have an opinion?
I don't know how we got here from there or whatever, but it does seem like Auburn's lost control of our resource, to me. But obviously, there's been a bunch of negotiations through AvCog and what have you. It almost seems like Lewiston owns our water or something like that. But we should be able to say, this is our resource, here's the negotiated rate.
I think we
I don't know how it's
I think
done.
we
How's
would
it
lose
done in
control of
Sebago?
our, I think we would lose control of our water if we did everything 60-40. I really do.
Well, here's what I think. I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I think this board has to get its ducks in a row. I've heard, I mean, Andy's not on the board right now, but we got about 3 people who are not very unhappy with the current, but with a few more questions. So we got 3 people who think there's a number of things that could be changed. And I still need more information before I have a strong opinion yet, because I do believe in data and analysis. I want to understand. I haven't had as much time as I would wish to study the decision-making matrix. I am a big fan of decision matrices because they open up a logic that I like to understand logic as the basis of decisions. And since questions are, to me, a good place to begin to analyze before we jump into things. I certainly don't think our ratepayers should pay more than they should. The question's, what's the should here? I understand from what I read in the paper that some people are already ready to rock and roll and talking to Lewiston. I believe that's a conversation that I already know how well that will not go. But that's now happened. It's like the Allen treatment. That's history now. We can't undo that decision, which incidentally was a unanimous vote of this board. Every single person on this board voted to go ahead with that because of the critical nature of the timing of the need to move forward with that treatment. We had a lake that needed the treatment, and it was a unanimous vote. Every single one of us voted yes. Even people who now don't like it, and we agreed to study this. And that's what we've been trying to do. But it has been a very rocky road to even agree to study it in a calm and thoughtful way. We are going to be calm and thoughtful about it now, even though some of us might be mad, or sure you know the answer. As far as the way to proceed, it's not really up to me. That's not the role of the president or anyone. It's something we have to agree as a board how to proceed. I do believe that if we send a short note to Lewiston, the city manager, who read the newspaper and has already knows this conversation is coming, is going to, we're not ready to have that conversation. It's going to say, what do you want? Well, this board doesn't know what we want yet. We don't agree yet. 3-3 vote, that means, because I'm not ready to vote, so I'd abstain. So if we have a vote today, we would vote 3-3 with 1 abstention, and that means we're not ready. So we have to get ready. That's our job.
Which side
Yeah,
am I
where do
on?
you do that? Can you explain?
Well,
that?
I thought you, and maybe I'm wrong, so I should be not.
I'd like to know where I've been put, as far
I
as
thought
which side I'm gonna
you
vote.
agreed with Dan and Jason that we should be splitting more things.
Then that's correct.
That's how I thought, and I think said basically things have gone well here. Few more questions to ask, and Casey thinks things have gone well in the agreements, and Bob.
Is that how you feel, Tiz?
I would say, I wouldn't abstain because I would
I
vote
would
on this.
abstain.
Right, but I would say that I sit more in the, we're not finished yet. So again, some of it is how the question is framed. I think the question really is, where do each of us think we should go and what exactly we need done? I absolutely disagree with Bob and
Oh,
and
okay.
that. So
Then
I
thank you
put me
for
on the
your
other.
question.
And
Yeah.
I got an additional question, maybe
Right.
for Sid. When you say, what does losing control of the water mean?
A management.
This board controls it, one pound, right? And that's.
But if we expect Lewiston to pay for 60% of everything because they use 60% of the water, if we expect them to contribute more than we do, it only falls in line that they are going to have a majority control over the decision-making
Why does
process
that
as
fall in
well.
line? Does that happen in the areas where we already are sharing at the usage-based rate? Or are you saying once?
No, but I'm just
happens
thinking
in
if
the whole
you expand that formula to everything that happens, I just see the potential there.
Well,
Again, but
I'd be a majority partner in a majority financial partner in the delivery of water, and I think they would, could potentially have majority control over the decision-making process as well. If they're
They might
if they're expected to
negotiate
contribute 60% of everything, I think they would expect 60% of the say on what happens.
That happened at Lopka?
That one's a little, that's a little different. That's a simpler type of arrangement with the sewer treatment plant, because everything you send them simply gets treated and
But
the
yeah,
bill is split. I mean, but the water delivery is a much more complicated thing. As you can see, all the things that can happen in the delivery of water. It's not really you're not really comparing the same thing when you look at the two systems.
I guess my question is, it's 60-40 and they make the decisions, but what are they gonna, like, what decisions can they make that are gonna affect us in a negative way? Like, I don't see what the bad, like, what are they gonna do, put up a amusement park over there? Like,
What bad thing could it be?
Well,
Right.
if they're expected to pay more, like say there's a piece of property out there that we think is critical, Auburn thinks is critical, Lewiston might not, because they're going to be spending a lot more for that same piece of property. It could just introduce some complications into some things that we
I
need
have
to
to
do.
correct that. We have not bought land. Land is not an appropriate example of this.
Well, we fund the commission. We fund the commission, we don't have to,
Wait,
we
hold
do,
on,
and the commission buys
Let's
land.
let Tiz finish, she's a
Yep.
commissioner.
Tis a representative for LawPAC as well.
She's a commissioner.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
So, we should not be discussing how we purchase land here. If we, the water district, have an interest or concern, it should come to the watershed protection. We actually have had an example, to answer your question since I have the floor, of when there was a decision, and I was on the board. Because we are 50-50 cleaning up the intake pipe would have been a 50-50 expense. Lewiston, as a 50-50 partner, delayed that decision for almost 4 months because they didn't want to spend the money at that time because it wasn't politically beneficial.
They delayed it for years,
So,
months.
John Storer was superintendent then, and it was in our best interest, the city of Auburn's ratepayers, to get that thing fixed since it's a single pipe. So the trustees supported John's position to have the work done, knowing we could be held accountable for 100%, even though Lewiston would benefit, because we were not willing to take that risk. A 60-40 split, all those kind of decisions would be made exclusively by the higher power. The way to solve that problem, I believe, but I don't have enough information, Sid immediately said, no, LOPCA didn't work. I'm not sure that's true because I don't know if LOPCA board members are equal representation from Auburn and
Yes,
Lewiston,
it is.
or if it's proportioned. In the case of the Watershed Protection Commission, Lewiston and Auburn each have equal representation, but there's an equal third that neither of us control, yet the two of us pay the money.
Thank you. It's helpful to think about these questions in this way. So I want to suggest a way forward. I think that if we have 2 meetings in February. We have a workshop on February 5th, and we have a trustees meeting on February 19th. On February 5th, one thing we're not going to get to tonight, and we owe Sid some workshop time to share with him, to get some board buy-in to his goals for 2020. That was something we were going to do last week, and then we didn't really have a quorum, and it had snowed and after a hearing. And so we didn't have our workshop after the PUC hearing after all. But I think in this conversation, certainly we wanted to have the focus on cost sharing tonight. I think that on February 19th, at our next regular board meeting, I think here's my request to everyone, is to send to everyone, to Sid and to every trustee. And I invite the public who's here to do that too. Every question or thought you have regarding Sid's recommendation, and any recommendation you have of your own to change what he has offered us as trustees. That's why we asked him to do this, so we would have a working document to refer to. So I would ask that before November 19th, February 19th, see, this is what, before, I did get the year right though, February 19th, that you will send all thoughts, ideas, other questions to all of us, so that on February 19th, we will have compiled those. We are not going to discuss them by email because that is not appropriate use for a venue for trustee discussion, as we have been told by legal counsel more than once. But I think we want the transparency of everybody can see everything without discussion on email. And then we will bring them to the February 19th meeting, and we will try to resolve all the outstanding questions and issues so that when whoever will be the next president of the water district and the treasurer go to meet with whoever in Lewiston City, probably the city manager, you will have a board-approved document that recognizes what this board collectively thinks. If we can have consensus, that's good. But the reality of how process works, and I just want to say, not every vote goes the way all of us want. As you know, I am philosophically committed to trying to provide enough information and process to see if we can achieve consensus, but we can't always. And if it's a 4-3 vote and our view doesn't prevail, then in fact we have to be mature adults and say, my view was not upheld in the vote. I have a minority opinion this time. But what we owe each other is that we will have talked with each other, listened, and tried to understand at least where the others of us are coming from, even if our point of view does not win the day. That's what we owe each other to be a good quality functioning board.
I had one point to clarify that rather than simply putting together the questions to bring to the meeting, that we should put together the questions and request, if there are specific questions we would like answered from staff, maybe try to get through those answers first.
Yeah.
I
Then
think
so that when we
one of those
come to
questions
the meeting,
is,
we have
Hold
our
on, Dan.
Steve brought up, is
Hold
to
on.
clarify control over operations.
One at a time. I want to just make sure that Jason's point got said, and clarify, because we get confused when we jumble ourselves. So Jason's request, let me say, if I rephrase it, then tell me if I got it wrong, or right, is that we will send all of our questions to all of us, but particularly Sid will pay attention to them. And maybe we should put a
should
target.
call them out and say, this is a question for.
Yeah, and that you will answer those questions and send the information to all of us prior to the February 19th meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do other people agree with that suggestion? No?
I think you need to be clear on the date. This is where we get in trouble. So if
just
I
about
was
to do
reading
that.
Jason's request and your original homework, I would say that any questions, information, review of our documents, all related, need to be submitted to all of us in SID by February 12th. That gives him 2 days to get the agenda packet together. We can send it earlier, but that's the drop dead date.
Now, if we wanted to give us answers, does that give him enough time?
He's got a week. We don't need
Oh,
the answers, we do provide supplemental materials at the table, which are then supposed to be posted, because as we did tonight, if he gets them on the 12th, we all get them, because we need as much time as he does to reflect on the other people's input.
how, does that
I just
support
don't
what-
think that's fair to Sid and staff. I think the 5th should be the date so that he has several days prior to, so we can have a response, so that then we can have the response at the meeting, decisions being, not reading the response the day before when we get there. And it also isn't fair, you know, if we have, maybe we'll have follow-up questions, or, I just think there needs to be quite a bit more time in 2 days.
You should ask Sid about this too.
Yeah, what do you think?
Next
Sid?
question.
What question?
Sid, how
Well,
about-
I think the question begs the question, I don't know what people might have for questions, if they want the last 10 years of data, or, you know, I don't know what's gonna convince me for questions, if it's something that's just really labor intensive. I don't know if people have an idea of what they have for questions, that want.
I know what my question is. What is the difference in the budget if it was 60-40 versus the 50-50? That's, like, what's the difference? That would be my question.
Calculate.
We
On
need
all
some
the items.
specifics though, because you can't just.
It's
just
not one
can't-
thing.
Yeah, we can't blanket 60-40, as you
Well,
can see.
if you go by
You need
this-
specifics.
Well, based on water usage.
Most of what we do now is 60-40, really.
Well,
So
what's
the
there's-
parts that aren't, well, how would that affect the budget? So that,
Yeah.
like the employees that are 50-50, how would it be if they were 60-40 instead?
Is that something you think
Well,
about the
there
workers
must
out
be a
there?
big number that, or else we wouldn't be having the discussion.
Well, we don't really know.
Depends on what you're talking about too. We talk, moving forward is a question, if today, if we did everything tomorrow, we started apportioning 60-40, I guess that's one question.
But we're not gonna backdate it. So let me see, because I think you're on to something that I actually am curious about. I just have to find my piece of paper. So personnel
Yep.
is 50-50. And in most organizations, personnel is one of the most expensive things you do. So if I go through what the current practice is now, and so,
Right now, that would be the treatment manager, the watershed manager, and the
yeah,
education.
so take the operations such as the testing lab and supplies, I can see everything where
that's-
you say 50-50.
Yes, I see that, and I see those, those numbers next to it, but is that, so we have future liabilities as well, correct? Is there future liability
When you,
at 50-50? Like if we have to build a filter,
well,
that's
that's,
gonna be 60-40.
that's,
That is.
well, that's going to be based upon, if you go by my analysis, I mean, that would be something that would be discussed as it came up. And my recommendation is to go by this.
So I guess my question would be, what's the context of the discussion from a financial standpoint? What are we talking about to change budgetarily from this year to next if we did the things that are not 60-40, 60-40?
Yeah.
Take
Be able to
every
come up with a
category,
ballpark.
take every category that's not 60-40 by usage and turn it into a 60-40 for current operations, for the current environment.
So you could take, I guess, if you're asking for that number, you could take the commission budget, which is now 50-50, if you made that 60-40,
Yep.
there's some,
Everything.
is there, the shared
Take
person.
Because
every-
obviously our trucks and stuff, we're not gonna be,
Right.
that's ours.
That's a separate.
We're only looking, yeah, if you're only looking at shared things,
Yeah.
things come to the top of my head, you know, the commission expenses, the shared personnel, which are currently 50-50.
The lab
The
work,
skater person, what's his
Well,
name?
no, we have one, they have one.
yeah.
Well, that's
Because
still
then at the
50-50.
end, we can say, all right, here's the risk, and is the risk of loss of control worth this much money?
So,
We should clarify loss of control too, we don't know
Yeah.
we don't
how.
know.
Right.
They just didn't pay their half the bill on the water intake thing.
No, they didn't.
It's just, we can hold back payments too. So
well,
that's all it was, it wasn't losing
Yeah,
control of
right,
anything.
so that's, I
So-
think that's a legitimate, like,
So
what
let's
does
just
loss
take-
of control mean?
but we don't know we're gonna lose control. I wanna stick
No,
with
that's
the
just a
number.
potential, I'm not
that's
saying
a-
it's going to happen,
we've heard
I'm
that
saying
threat
that,
3
that could
times
be a
now.
potential pitfall.
I
That's
just
all I'm
wanna see
saying.
the dollars. I have not yet to see the dollars. I've heard lots of people talk about it's tons of money. I have no idea if it is or isn't. And so every place you see 50-50 that you gave us on your very document, how the labs are run, the personnel that are not 50-50.
I mean, I can do math, but
You
is
just do
that?
10% of each number, that's 50-50.
So,
Add them together.
I like your idea.
11
of
months,
having us
remember.
submit questions at a reasonable time, have a response.
so back to that. this is a question, it's obviously not a really complicated one.
Right.
So, questions to all of us shared, but to Sid, by February 5th.
I think that's not sufficient time for us. So I'd like a vote on the 12th.
All right,
Why don't we go in the middle of those two
Yeah, I
dates?
would be fine with that.
how would
I don't
you
think
it's
feel?
in the
Days,
middle.
just halfway between
I think we
5th and
need
the
that
12th.
second weekend is my concern, so if you want to make it the
It's 2
10th
weeks.
or
How about
the
Monday the
9th.
10th?
Yeah, it-
Monday the 10th. Is that a compromise?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Sooner if you can.
As soon as possible, but no later than February 10th. Okay, we got a compromise here and a consensus. And Sid will provide us in our board packet all the questions that were submitted. We would have seen them by virtue of email sharing. And answers that he has had a chance to provide us in advance. And if there's still things you're working on at the point you have to mail out the board packet, then we can bring an updated document to the board meeting. Is that okay with everybody? So that gives us February. All right. We have 16 minutes. What I'd like to do in the 16 minutes, because Sid has some things we have to do, is I'll simply comment that we had a public hearing for the rate increase, and we are on track to submit our documents, get our cash position back to 100 days. The case goes to the PUC that we have with the hearing documents on next Tuesday. We have distributed and made available petitions for anyone who would wish to petition against the rate increase. 1,000 people are part of the PUC formula. That's the status of where we are on that.
1,000 people to what?
To challenge the rate. And that's based on a percentage of our customers by virtue of the PUC.
Is there gonna be a public notice put out for that information?
There was.
There was, yeah.
The 1,000 and all that?
Yeah. We worked hard on this one. None of it is ever easy. We started in September. We've had workshops, we've had meetings, we've tried to provide all information that everyone had asked for in advance. I'm sorry we didn't reach consensus. It was a 4-3 vote. And I think we just have to respect that we didn't agree. We will get our cash on hand back to 100 days where it has to be, and we're gonna continue to deliver quality water through actual pipes that are gonna get replaced in the ground. On the business in the last 15 minutes that has to happen, I know there's a water quality update and a purchase bid, some bids for purchases that Sid needs us to attend to.
Yep. Quite simply on the water quality update, it's in my memo there. I mean, this is the time of year that water quality is probably at its best. You know, once the lake freezes over, get some snow on top of it, that is sealing the lake over, inhibiting any biological activity, wind action that can get to the lake, stir it up and cause problems. So the lake is doing very well right now, as it always does, in the middle of the winter. I do want to mention that there is, at the February trade show this year, there is going to be a presentation done on the alum treatment that was done. That's going to be done by a consultant from Ty and Bond, Heather Doolittle, and Chris Curtis is going to be co-presenting that. So if any of the trustees want to attend that session, let me know. I can sign you up. It's
Is that similar to what they did at Bates College?
This is going to be different. This is going to be, it's going to be a little different. It's going to take different aspects of that whole thing, regulatory, planning, and so forth. It's going to be a little more comprehensive.
And the bids that you need us to talk about?
Yep,
Do you have some action items there?
That over to Mike.
We have two capital items on our budget that we've approved to purchase. One being a plotter upstairs. We have a plotter machine. We print all of our large-scale plans, construction drawings, etc. To replace that, we have $9,000 budgeted. I did reach out and got a quote to replace the one that we have with the model that we would like. Comes out at $7,200 less than budget, so I did find one competitive number for that. Selling printers and plotters of this size, you wind up with a licensed dealer for this area, so I had to go outside of this area to find somebody else who could quote it. So it's tough to get multiple bids on the same one, but
Is the other
bottom
one
line
not
is-
working, or is there a problem with it?
So the one that we have now doesn't copy, doesn't scan, it only prints. We have to run down the city building to make copies or to scan things. So the one we're gonna get is gonna be all inclusive, so.
It was in the budget that we went
Yep.
through, very detailed process.
So we'd like to purchase that, we bring this up to the sewer
Approve
board,
the
and they agreed to go ahead with the purchase of this from Spillers, which is located right in Lewiston.
So you have bids on this?
Yep, so for $7,200 of the budgeted $9,000, I don't anticipate any other costs with the purchase.
So we got it for less than budget?
Yep.
You need us to have a motion to approve?
Yeah.
No, it's in the budget.
Oh,
That was a 50-50 with sewer?
so you don't need a motion to approve?
We normally bring those up as an FYI, I mean,
Okay,
It's-
it's just,
yeah, it's in the budget.
Second item is, we budgeted this year to replace our meter van. We budgeted $35,000 to replace that vehicle. That is a water-only expense for that vehicle. I did put that out to bid. We sent it to several dealerships. I think I sent it to 9 around this area. And I did get 6 bids back. There was a low bidder, but their vehicle was not available for 16 weeks, and that was kind of uncertain. There was one bid that was slightly higher for very like $135 that is available now. Now's the time of year where it's practical for us to take a vehicle out of service, because when we give them the other one, we get the new one, we gotta have, the stuff put on it and installed in it. So we essentially have some downtime there. I'd rather do that now than in 16 weeks. So I'd like to go ahead with the purchase of the meter van. The vehicle base price is gonna be $22,000. We're gonna put a cap on it and some tools, and I think we're gonna come out at around $30,000. So again, we'll be below the budget number we set.
Budgeted, what?
We budgeted $35,000, so we should be in good shape.
it's all good
So
then.
an FYI then.
I like FYIs, especially to come in under budget.
What do we get, who are we getting it from, what are we getting?
We're getting Chevy Colorado from Emerson Chevy here in Auburn.
Good, local.
So
Dumb question.
you sure can.
When we do fall under budget on these types of items, do they stay in that account until the end of the year? Do they automatically come to a bottom, to an,
That's all part of cash on hand, essentially.
Okay.
You know, if
There is,
we
there
have,
is no account.
okay, right, in the line, excuse me.
So we're gonna do trustee open session in a minute. So February 5th, if you all are in agreement, is a workshop for goal setting for the superintendent's year. And before you leave, I will give you a draft that I think Jason has seen, and from at the end of the annual review process, I created what I was seeing from the annual review, and I just wrote down things that had common thoughts of what should be goals for the year, and I'll give every trustee a copy of this as you leave.
What time is that workshop?
What time is that?
So it's February 5th. We have tried to do them at 4 or 4:30. Jason obviously has a problem coming from Portland, but I think you're out of town
that
anyway.
week, so
Can we do it on the 5th at 4 PM, our usual time? Steve, did
Yeah.
I,
Plans on being done by 6.
The minutes say 4:30.
the minutes say 4:30?
Yeah.
the later the better for me.
Can we do it at-
We're in workday at 4 o'clock.
Then let's do
4:30 to
4:30.
6.
Yep,
Yeah,
4:30
it
to
says
6.
4:30 to 6.
Thank you.
4:30 now?
4 o'clock, so we'll just leave it the way
That's the
it was
agenda.
originally.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
not
so
changing
4:30.
it. It's on at 4:30 on February 5th, and we'll work on goals. So trustee open
So
session,
we have clarification, because you keep using the word goals and then you talk about SIDS goals.
superintendent's goals.
Okay, so we're gonna set superintendent's goals without discussing what our institutional goals are for the coming year?
Well, here's how I thought about that.
I mean, that's just a question, no opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have, I think we owe Sid, giving him, coming off of his annual review, some goals. Last June, this board established 3 priorities. One was to look at cost sharing and and move forward with it. One was to understand filtration systems, and we did a workshop in October. And one was to understand water quality and other aspects related to the lake. So those are our 3 priority areas. That was a complete consensus of those who were at that workshop based on the input that we got. So until we have the next person, I mean, my recommendation for the next president is to next June do another priority setting workshop, reflecting on where we've come from, updating that, and we will have another president and another person in the seat that you now occupy after our election. But in the meantime, the superintendent and our priorities remain those top 3 items until we have reached the 1-year mark in June for the 3 that we already set. And so the goals that came out of his annual review relate to the full spectrum of the responsibilities and the job description of the superintendent. And Steve, you're just coming into this, we have a job description, we used it, and it is to the credit of this board and to the superintendent that this is in fact was the very first annual review that has ever happened for a superintendent here. And we worked hard with legal counsel to do that process well. So that's the answer to that. It's not a perfect process, we'll keep getting better at it.
There was no opinion of that. I asked a simple question. Were we talking superintendent's goals or our goals? I agree with your statement. They need to be reviewed annually, whether it was March or June. I didn't have an opinion. I just wanted clarification so I understood my homework this time.
And I explicated more so that Steve could get caught up a little bit more. Yes, Casey?
I'd like to not skip over project update and Mike's activity.
Well, we have 5 minutes, and I would like to have
I can
that.
last till 6.
Okay, let me do this then while Steve, before we lose people at 5:30 and then get Mike's report, because I do want to have a chance for trustee open session.
Is this going to be an executive session this February 5th?
Yes. Trustee open session. I want to make sure every trustee here has a chance, when people leave, I'll have that up. That every trustee who has anything they wish to say now can do so.
I submitted my report in writing and would expect to be reflected on and addressed prior next meeting or at it.
Good, terrific, thank you. Dan, do you have anything you want to
I
say?
submitted it to the newspaper, my apologies, but that's what I did. I'm feeling better, I feel like cleansed, that the ratepayers know that there's some problems. My opinion.
Anybody else? Anybody else have anything you want to say? So I have something I want to say. Every single one of us has, as an individual and a resident here, every right to say our thoughts. And if we choose to publish them in the newspaper, that is in fact our right. We cannot speak for this board as trustees unless the board has voted to authorize us to be the representative of the board's opinion. It's certainly true that we are trustees and therefore we have an understanding about things. But I would ask any person who is exercising their absolute individual right to express their opinion and be cleansed of a feeling of burden, to be very careful in how you articulate this as a personal opinion as opposed to a trustee board opinion. And it's possible for the community to get confused. I mean, I for one have many opinions. As president, I hardly ever bring them up in this role because the role of the president is not to guide the decisions, but to guide the process. If I were to ever write a letter to the editor, which I'm not probably prone to doing, I would ask, you would want me to not say as president or former president, because I cannot speak in those capacities without the endorsement of this board. We are a board of strongly opinioned people. We have seen that all year. It's why, frankly, it's been an exhausting year for me, utterly exhausting. And I thought the strategic planning process we were part of was exhausting. This has been hard work here, because there are 7 strongly opinioned and highly vocal people. That's all fine, it's the American way. But when we're here as a board, we have to come together as a board. And when we speak as board members, we have to be respectful of each other. And the fact that we are speaking as an individual and not as a board member has to, I would encourage any one of us to be very careful about how we do that. Steve and Andy before him and Tiz before that, as city council persons, could speak for themselves even as a counselor. But you were careful, I know, to not say you were speaking for the council. And it's a really tricky matter, but it's an important part of our responsibility. And it conveys respect for each other. And that, I will just say, as a trustee, that I felt disrespected as a fellow trustee to wake up Sunday morning and read that your special insights, some of which you got a few facts that might be viewed in different ways, but you did not make it as clear to an everyday reader that you were speaking for yourself as an individual with a strong opinion of your own, and it could easily have been conveyed and understood in a different way. So I'll just ask for us all to be careful how, when we choose to exercise our rights to express ourselves in writing or in person, that we're incredibly careful to differentiate how we're speaking as an individual and how we're not speaking as trustees on behalf of the board, or even accidentally misunderstood that way. We've worked too hard together, including on cost sharing. I mean, KC basically got voted out of the presidency over this issue. I have spent untold hours trying to keep us together in any form of a process to study cost sharing. It is one of the reasons I can't continue. I have a 99-year-old mother in another state. How many months will I ever have left in her life? And I believe in process and good decision-making. But I can't put any more time into this. It's been a 40-hour-a-week job for me, not paid. I used to get paid serious cash to do the work I just did for free for this last year. And I can't. I can't. No one here wants this job the way it's been this last year. I want to tell you. We can do better than this as a board, but it means we have to work together. It means what you asked me to help try to do here and help us bring this together means that we have to choose to do that so that we can actually be effective, and whoever will become the next president can be effective. And so and our public deserves this. We provide water, the life's blood of life, to half the people of our community. It's a huge responsibility. And we must do it well. And I'm sorry for the impassioned speech, but this is what we're called to. I remember once a conversation with Andy and talking about public service. And this is that public service is hard. And those of you on council or former council know better than anybody else how hard public service is. But it's not just the minutes, the hours you spend at the meeting, it's the importance of what you do. We're not quite that important here, but there aren't many things in life more important than safe drinking water. So that's it. This is our public service, and we care about ratepayers. I don't doubt that any single one of us cares, but we have many ways that we have to fulfill that public service. And thank you for listening to me, as I will listen to you, and I wish us well. I have 2 more meetings that I will be, 1 workshop and 1 more meeting that I will be facilitating. And I will be a very committed next board member. And I ask us to do our best, bring our best selves every single time. And have respect for each other. And for the work we're doing together. Not as a group of opinionated, vocal, thinking people together, not just individuals. Because when we're here, we're a group. And that is the end of my homily.
If we're still in open session, I have a question because it's now come up, open session come up twice tonight. I keep hearing we're ending at a certain time. I have no problem ending at a certain time, but if there is an end time, an official end time, it should be in the agenda, and we should all know. And if it's going to be limited, which I would strongly support, the hour and a half, then anything that's provided to us in writing should not be repeated. It can just be asked if we have questions. If we're ending early because people are leaving, we should continue our agenda until there is a lack of quorum, because I too want project updates and that. I would just like, put my request under trustee is, are we going to decide to have a limit on length? And if we are, what will it be? And then how will we address it? Because we can't get through everything when we have good quality conversations, like this first trustee session that we've had.
Good point. We don't have to end at 5:30. I want to make sure that the voting business happened at 5:30 before we lose Steve. We typically try to be done no later than 6. I would like everyone who can stay for the activity report to please do so. The meeting is not complete until we've heard from the activity report. It's the final piece on the agenda, but for those who must leave, please don't leave without seeing me to get one of these.
One last question about the goals that will be discussed at the February 5th workshop. Can we
What do you think?
take this, but also any feedback prior to, so that when...
Well, we can't email it.
Have a good one,
so
Steve.
Right.
Bring it to the bid meeting.
Thank you, folks.
Okay.
February 5th. Any feedback, bring to the meeting. He's not being here.
I'm going to
Yep.
take a
Yep,
chance to maybe pick up from time for this. From driving.
we don't want to get in trouble.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming. Okay, activity report.
All right, activity report, under mains, did have a few leaks in December. I did make a mistake on here. We only had 1 leak on Chestnut Street and 1 leak on Winter Street. Those were repeated in there. That was my error, I apologize. We did have a number of leaks, Winter, Chestnut. We had one on Manley Road, Taft, and Silver Streets. That's about average, but
What's emergency dig safe?
emergency dig safe is we get called in on the weekend or after hours because usually a utility pole gets hit or some emergency dig situation. So
I saw that one too, I circled it, yeah, I was wondering.
that was just a call out that we had for a dig safe.
But they can be routine or emergency. If they're emergencies, within.
We have to go within an hour, we have to respond. Hydrants, again, that takes up the bulk of a lot of our activities in the winter is maintaining our hydrants. We go, we dip, we check those, we shovel them, we make sure they're marked and visible to the public, even with the snow that tends to grow this time of year. So that's been keeping us busy. We just, when we do a lot of the maintenance on the hydrants, like dipping them and pumping them out, there's maintenance that's generated. So a lot of our time and effort goes into hydrants this time of year. Services, nothing too out of the ordinary with services, just a few repairs. couple of frozen meter calls already in December. I know those usually grow in January and February. But nothing too out of the ordinary in the activity report as far as this time of year. Nothing too much to point out unless anybody had any questions. You want me to move right into project update?
Please.
All right, project update. So we do have a number of capital projects budgeted for and planned for this year. I've printed all of those project maps and work areas out. I am in the process of reviewing those with staff here. I'm going to be meeting with City Engineer Tony Bullier and Chris Bennett very soon. They're having a utility coordination meeting to go over all the utility work and the construction going on in the city this coming season. I'm also going to be sending these maps and drawings out to Unitil, the gas company, because a number of these streets where we're going to be doing the water main work, there are conflicts with gas, so we have to anticipate those and plan those out so that when the construction season hits, we don't have delays. So working on that. You know, as we move closer, Sid and I are going to be sitting down to look at each one of those projects to figure out, you know, which ones we're going to be undertaking, which ones we may bid out as part of city projects, or a number of the project areas I've been looking at are good candidates for pipe bursting, which is a technique we've used out on Poland Road and other streets that's saved costs and made projects happen a lot quicker. So again, that's where we're at with a lot of those projects.
Thank you, and
Yep.
thank you for all the hard work you do.
Oh, thank you.
I like it. Anything else that we need to do before we move for adjournment? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there anybody opposed? No. The motion carries. Dan, you want to